The annual company gala was in full swing when the first clink of a champagne glass cut through the chatter. Eleanor sat at the edge of the marketing department's table, her fingers loosely wrapped around a glass of orange juice she hadn't touched. Up on stage, the lights dimmed, then a spotlight swung toward the executive table. Her husband, Derek, rose from his seat. A champagne rose was pinned to his sleeve. He hadn't worn that at home. Tonight, there's something I've been meaning to say to someone special. The crowd went quiet. The young woman next to Eleanor nudged her. Ellie, Mr. Reynolds is so handsome. What's he doing? Derek's gaze swept across the room and landed on the table beside the executive section. There, blushing under the attention, stood Vivian, the new senior director. A few colleagues playfully shoved her forward. Her cheeks turned pink from her ears down to her neck. Vivian has been with us for 3 months, Derek said, his voice smooth through the microphone. I've seen her talent. I've seen her heart. And I've been holding something back for too long. The marketing team started whooping. Eleanor noticed someone at the next table recording on their phone. A woman from HR screamed, "Say yes. Say yes." Vivian stepped onto the stage in her heels. When Derek handed her the mic, their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice trembling, "you don't know how long I've waited for this. From the very first day I saw you in the elevator, I just knew." The room erupted. Someone shouted, "Kiss her." Another person whistled. Eleanor's supervisor, an older man named Frank, turned around and grinned at her. "Ellie, you're younger than Vivian. Take notes, sometimes you have to be the one to make the first move." Eleanor glanced down at her gray sweater. She'd bought it on sale last year. She said nothing. Up on stage, Derek took Vivian's hand. The projector flickered, and someone switched the feed to the big screen. Their figures, together in the spotlight, filled the entire wall. Someone from the crowd called out, "What a perfect couple." "Starting tonight," Derek announced, lifting Vivian's hand high, "I, Derek Reynolds, am officially pursuing Vivian. And I want all of you to witness it." Thunderous applause. The young woman next to Eleanor stood up and clapped, then stopped mid-clap. She looked down at Eleanor, still seated. "Ellie, are you okay?" Eleanor set her orange juice down. The glass made a soft clink against the tablecloth. She pushed her chair back. The leg scraped the floor, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the crowd. No one noticed her. She walked along the aisle toward the side exit. Passing the control booth, she paused. A technician named Leo was grinning up at the big screen. When he saw her, he straightened up. "Ellie? Give me the mic," Eleanor said. Leo blinked. He pointed to the second drawer. "There's a backup in there." Eleanor didn't open the drawer. She reached past him and pressed a red button on the control panel. A sharp feedback screech tore through the sound system. Everything stopped. 300 eyes turned toward the booth. Derek stood frozen in the spotlight, his smile still half-formed. Vivian's hand was still raised in his grip. Eleanor walked to the podium at center stage. She adjusted the microphone downward. The metal stand clicked as it lowered. "Sorry to interrupt." Her voice came through every speaker in the room. Flat. Calm. "I'm speaking now as the CEO. I have an announcement." Derek's smile vanished. He let go of Vivian's hand and took a step forward. "Ellie. To congratulate Director Reynolds and Senior Director Vivian on their happy union today," Eleanor continued, not looking at him, "I'm doubling everyone's year-end bonus. Every penny will be deducted from his salary." Absolute silence. The only sound was the projector humming. On the big screen, the frozen image of Derek holding Vivian's hand hung there like a paused movie. The HR woman who'd screamed "Say yes" stood frozen, mouth open. Frank's disposable cup slipped from his hand. Coke splashed across his pants, but he didn't even notice. Leo shrank behind the control booth, eyes wide as dinner plates. Vivian was the first to react. She pulled her hand free and stepped backward. Her heels clicked sharply against the stage floor. Who are you? Vivian's voice shook. What CEO? Eleanor pulled her phone from her pocket, lit up the screen, and turned it toward the audience. The wallpaper was the company's internal executive directory. At the very top, one line stood out, Eleanor Vance, Group CEO. This identity, Eleanor said, tucking the phone away, has been hidden for 3 years. Derek and I have been married that long. He never told any of you. Derek's face went white. Gasps rippled through the room. Murmurs rose like a swarm of bees. Frank tried to stand, but his chair tipped, and he hit the floor. No one helped him up. CEO, the young woman next to Eleanor's seat whispered. Ellie is the CEO? On stage, Vivian's color drained completely. She turned to Derek. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Derek lunged forward. The microphone slipped from his hand and crashed against the floor with a deafening bang. Ellie, let me explain. But Eleanor was already walking away. Derek scrambled off the stage, knocking over a tray of drinks. Glasses shattered everywhere. He ran through the broken glass toward the side door, but the security guard, an older man named George, blocked his path. Sorry, sir. Ms. Vance gave instructions. You can't follow. Derek froze. George had been promoted last month. The approval signature on that promotion order was Eleanor's. He'd never bothered to read the name. The side door clicked shut. Eleanor's figure disappeared down the hallway. Back in the ballroom, 300 people stared at each other. The big screen still glowed with that romantic spotlight shot, like an unfinished punchline. Vivian stood on stage, her hands clutching the fabric of her dress, knuckles pale. She looked at the side door, then at Derek's back. Then she spoke into the microphone. Derek, when you confessed to me tonight, did you know she was your wife? That question landed like a match in gasoline. The room exploded. Derek pushed past George and made his way back to the stage. He reached for Vivian's hand, but she stepped away. His fingers closed on empty air. Vivian, let me explain. Explain what? Vivian's voice shot up. You just told 300 people you were in love with me. But you've been married for 3 years? Phones started pinging across the room. One after another, the notification chimes built into a cascade. Frank finally pulled himself off the floor and checked his phone. It was a new company-wide announcement. One line, Director Derek Reynolds is suspended pending investigation. Finance will calculate the doubled bonus amount within 72 hours. Deductions will be enforced. Signed, Office of the CEO. Frank looked up at the side door where the gray sweater had disappeared. Then at Vivian, trembling on stage. Then at Derek, pale as chalk. I've been here 15 years, Frank muttered. And I just found out who the CEO is. Derek's phone was ringing nonstop. He ignored it. He stared at George's expressionless face by the side door. Something clicked in his mind. Last month, his performance review had included a comment, lacks integrity, watch your personal conduct. He'd assumed it was a jealous colleague's anonymous dig. He demanded HR investigate. HR responded the same day, comment submitted directly by the CEO's office. Identity withheld. Derek had slammed his fist on the table and called it amateur theater. Now he remembered, the CEO's office reported to only one person. Eleanor. Vivian stepped down from the stage. Her heel twisted on the stairs, and no one caught her. She caught herself against the wall and walked to Derek, still clutching the microphone. You told me you were single, she said, her voice low but still audible through the speakers. You told me you hadn't dated anyone in 3 years because you were waiting for me. Derek opened his mouth. This morning, you told me we'd look at rings after the gala. Vivian laughed. It came out more like a sob. Derek, did you honestly think you were the only smart person in this building? Someone in the crowd snorted. Then another. Then a chain of barely suppressed laughter. Derek spun around, his eyes scanning the room. Faces looked away. Some grinned. A few were still recording. He wanted to smash those phones, but shattered glass crunched under his feet. He didn't know where to step. Director Reynolds. Frank had finally reached him. Voice low. Let's get you to your office. You can't stay here. Derek glanced at the control booth. Leo had killed the projector. The big screen now showed a gray standby screen. But Derek could still see that frozen image in his mind. Everyone could. As Frank steered him toward the hallway, Derek felt every stare on his back. Pity. Amusement. Pure entertainment. Vivian didn't follow. She stood by the broken glass, set the microphone on the floor, and pulled out her phone. The company-wide announcement already had over 200 replies. Memes. Bonus calculations. One person asked, "How much does Director Reynolds make? Is it enough to cover everyone?" Vivian left the group chat. She pocketed her phone. Then she looked up. At the end of the hallway, she caught a glimpse of Eleanor stepping into the elevator. Gray sweater. Black pants. Flat shoes. A messy ponytail. Vivian had seen that silhouette before. On her first day, 3 months ago, someone had been crouched in the elevator, fixing a loose safety strip. Vivian had assumed it was the cleaning staff. The person had stood up, smiled, said, "Welcome aboard," and walked away. Vivian now realized that face belonged to the same person who'd adjusted the microphone tonight. The elevator doors slid shut. Before they closed, Eleanor glanced at her phone. A message from Derek lit up the screen. 6 words, no context. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Eleanor turned off the screen. The elevator mirror reflected her calm face. She looked like someone who'd just announced a standard personnel change. But her thumb had paused over another message before switching off. It was from a contact labeled Dad. Sent over a year ago. One line, "I found what you asked for." Before Derek joined, he marked married on his application. Spouse field was blank. He wrote your name somewhere else but crossed it out. Eleanor had read that message. Then she'd called HR and promoted Derek from manager to director. She wanted him high enough that everyone would see him fall. The elevator reached the basement. Eleanor stepped into the empty parking garage. Her car sat alone in the corner. She got in but didn't start the engine. Her phone buzzed. A friend request from Vivian. The note read, "Ms. Vance, can we talk?" Eleanor accepted. Vivian sent a voice message. Eleanor didn't play it. She used the transcription, "I didn't know he was married." "I'm sorry." Eleanor typed back, "I know you didn't." Vivian's typing indicator flickered for 2 full minutes. Then, Derek submitted the Gala proposal himself. He told HR he wanted to confess to his crush. HR asked if he needed leadership approval. He said no. Another message followed, "I just checked the approval form. The final sign-off was yours." Eleanor didn't reply. She started the engine. The garage hummed with its low rumble. In her side mirror, a figure emerged from the elevator. Gray suit. Sweat-plastered hair. Cola stains on his trousers. Derek had caught up. He'd somehow gotten an elevator pass. When the doors opened, he'd run across the garage, breathing hard. "Ellie." His voice echoed off the concrete. "Get out. Let's talk." Eleanor shifted into reverse. She rolled back half a car length. Derek ran a few steps. His shoes slipped on the polished concrete. He nearly fell. Eleanor stopped. She rolled down the window. She rested her arm on the frame and looked at him across the empty space. "Derek," she said. Voice not high, not low. Just audible. "When you joined, you filled out a form. The marital status box said married. Who did you write in the spouse field? Derek went still. His face looked like paper under the harsh garage lights. I erased it for you, Eleanor said. I took a picture before I did. She powered off her phone and dropped it into the console. You didn't write my name. You wrote TBD. Derek's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish thrown onto dry ground. Eleanor rolled up the window. Shifted into drive. Hit the gas. The car slid past him. She didn't look at him. In the rearview, his figure shrank to a stationary at the far end of the garage. She pulled out onto the street. Night air rushed in. She adjusted the vent. The phone glowed in the console. Another message from Vivian, this time text. Ms. Vance, Derek told me he'd been planning this for 3 months. 3 months ago, you promoted him to director. Eleanor read it and stopped at a red light. She remembered that morning. Derek had walked out of his new director's office, beaming. Babe, give me one more promotion and you can quit that corner desk. She'd been watering the plants. She didn't turn around. Any desk is fine. He'd hugged her from behind. When I make VP, you can just stay home. Eleanor had put down the watering can. That was the last time he'd hugged her. After that, late nights. A new phone password. Perfume on his collars, sometimes. She never asked. He never explained. The light turned green. Eleanor pressed the accelerator. The car merged into traffic. She didn't need to see the Gala aftermath. She could imagine it. But tomorrow would be worse. When finance finished the math, Derek's 3 years of salary might not cover everyone's doubled bonuses. The remainder would come from his severance. She'd sent a second directive from the elevator. To legal. Subject, termination prep, Derek Reynolds. Back in the ballroom, the young woman from marketing finally picked up her phone. She scrolled through the explosion of messages under the company announcement. She turned to her neighbor. So, Ellie is really the CEO? And she's been sitting at our table this whole time? Her neighbor rolled her eyes. Your first task tomorrow, replace her seat cushion. Why? Because that's where the CEO sat for 3 years. And you've been dropping potato chip crumbs all over it. The young woman's face went green. On the main stage, Vivian still stood there. Staff were starting to clean up. Someone mopped the spilled Coke. Someone else righted the toppled chairs. Vivian picked up the fallen microphone. She spoke to the empty hall. Her voice carried through the speakers, down the hallway, toward the elevator, toward the garage where the car's taillights had just vanished. Derek. You picked the wrong person. She shut off the mic and handed it to a stunned staff member. Then she walked out of the Gala in her heels. Outside, the night wind hit her. She shivered and wrapped her arms around her champagne-colored dress. She pulled out her phone and sent Eleanor one more message. No text. Just a photo. It showed a crumpled sticky note, stuck to the inside of Derek's office drawer. His handwriting. A date. 3 lines. Line 1, target, VP. Line 2, secure Vivian. Line 3, Ellie? She'll figure it out eventually. Beneath the photo, Vivian wrote, found this in his office this afternoon. He asked me to grab something for him. I saw it. In the garage, the gray-suited figure finally moved. Derek walked to the spot where Eleanor's car had been. Tire marks still lined the concrete. He crouched down, palms flat against the ground. He stayed there for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. Already removed from the company group. Finance had posted a final calculation, bonus payout total, projected deduction period, 17 months. If Derek left earlier, the remainder would be deducted from his severance. Someone in the replies commented, 17 months. Director Reynolds must have a nice salary. Another reply, not nice enough to afford 2 households. Derek slammed the phone face down on the concrete. The screen spiderwebbed. He left it there. He looked up at the elevator's pale light. Something surfaced in his memory. One night, a year ago. Eleanor had sat on the couch and mentioned, "If you want a promotion, I know someone who could pass along your resume." How had he responded? "You know people? You're just a marketing assistant. Don't embarrass me." She'd said nothing. She'd gone back to knitting a scarf. That scarf later appeared in his office. He'd thought it was ugly and buried it in his cabinet. He couldn't find the cabinet key anymore. The garage was silent except for his own breathing. Then he remembered, the night Eleanor made that offer, her screen had lit up. An electronic offer letter. His name at the top. A blank signature line at the bottom. She'd been waiting for him to nod. He hadn't. His phone buzzed on the concrete. Cracked but still alive. HR was calling. He didn't answer. The call went to voicemail. A second later, a text arrived. "Mr. Reynolds, due to serious ethical misconduct and misrepresentation of marital status, your employment is terminated effective tomorrow. Please report to legal on Monday for processing." One final line at the bottom, signed, CEO Vance. Derek picked up the phone. The cracked screen reflected his own face, crumpled, pale, like a piece of paper someone had tried to smooth out but couldn't. He replayed Eleanor's last words. She'd said, "You wrote TBD. Not someone else. Not a placeholder. TBD." He hadn't even given her the certainty of a name. Just a blank space, a contingency plan. In case a better option came along. And she'd erased it. She'd kept his secret for 3 years. Until tonight, when he stood on stage and told 300 people that he'd been waiting for someone else. A horn sounded in the distance. Derek spun around. Just another car passing. Not Eleanor. She wasn't coming back. Inside the ballroom, the cleaning crew mopped the floors. Water swirled across broken glass. The big screen flickered, a notification popped up, CEO Vance requesting tech check for tomorrow's morning meeting. Leo saw it. Coffee splashed from his hand. His colleague leaned over. "What's wrong with you?" "What's wrong?" Leo pointed at the name. "Our CEO sat next to me for 2 years. I asked her to pick up my takeout last week." His colleague blinked. "And she did?" "Yeah. And she said to order the spicy one next time." His colleague patted his shoulder. "You might want to ask HR about a transfer tomorrow." Leo stared at the microphone drawer. Eleanor had checked those mics every single time she sat next to him. For 3 years. Every single time. Until tonight. The mic she used had a full battery. Clean audio. Every word, heard by 300 people. Late that night, Eleanor parked in her usual spot. She didn't get out right away. She reclined the seat slightly and stared at the car's reading light. The last photo Vivian sent, the sticky note, she'd studied it 3 times. First, the date. 3 months ago. The day she'd promoted Derek. Second, the content. 3 lines. 15 words that mapped out his next quarter. Third, the corner of the note. A piece was torn off. Something had been there before. Vivian hadn't captured it, but Eleanor knew what it was. She'd put it there herself. The sticky note had 4 lines in total. The fourth was Eleanor's. Tiny script, crammed at the bottom. Derek had probably never flipped the note over. It read, "You left it TBD. So I filled it in for you." She'd tucked that note into the deepest corner of his drawer. Then she'd sat in his office and waited for him to come back. He'd arrived late, smelling of liquor, and wrapped an arm around her. "Babe, I had to do a work dinner." When he reached into the drawer, a corner of the sticky note had fallen out. He'd glanced at it and shoved it back in. He hadn't read the whole thing. Eleanor switched off the reading light. In the dark, she blinked. Her eyes felt wet, but just barely. She opened her notes app. Typed one line, restore original sticky note to drawer. Then she locked the car and walked toward her building. In the elevator, she noticed the employee notice had come unstuck again. She pulled out a roll of tape from her bag, tore off a strip, and pressed it back into place. Her phone vibrated. Vivian, Ms. Vance, can I sit in on the morning meeting? I'd like to see how Derek's transition is handled. Eleanor typed one word, yes. The elevator arrived. She stepped out, unlocked her door. The living room lights came on. On the coffee table, a cold cup of tea sat untouched. Derek's mug. He'd brewed it this morning, before the gala, to stay sharp. No one had touched it. Eleanor picked it up and poured it down the sink. Rinsing the tea stains, she glanced at the mirror. Her gray sweater had a cola stain, probably from Frank's spill. She peeled it off and dropped it in the washing machine. Hit start. The drum hummed into the quiet night. Her phone lit up. Legal had sent a confirmation. Derek's termination was ready for final signature. Eleanor opened the document, scrolled to the bottom, and signed. The moment she hit send, a memory surfaced. 3 years ago. The courthouse. Wind blowing hard. Derek had taken off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. I've got your back, he'd said. On the marriage form, the spouse field had been empty. The clerk had pushed him to write something. He wrote married. But when he got to the spouse name, he wrote hers, then crossed it out. I'll fix it later, he'd told the clerk. The clerk said no, it had to be done now. Derek had glanced at his phone, taken a call, and stepped out. When he came back, the field was already filled. The handwriting was different. Eleanor had filled it in herself. Derek had glanced at it. Your handwriting's better than mine. He'd handed it in. He never asked why she carried a pen. Eleanor had brought 3 that day. A ballpoint. A fountain pen. And a correction pen. The washing machine stopped. She hung the wet clothes on the balcony. Night air swayed the gray sweater's sleeves, back and forth, like a head shaking no. She watched it for a moment. Then she took it down, folded it, and tucked it into the bottom drawer of her wardrobe. At the bottom of that drawer sat a document, an equity transfer agreement. Recipient, Derek. Date, 3 months ago. 15%. Exactly enough to make him VP. She'd never signed it. She rolled it up with a rubber band and fed it into the shredder. The machine whirred. Paper ribbons spilled into the bin. The top line was still readable in fragments. Mr. Derek Reynolds, this confirms. Date, 3 months ago. Eleanor closed the bin. She walked to the bedroom, drew the curtains, and plugged her phone in. The screen glowed. 1 a.m. The company group had crossed 1,000 messages. The latest from finance, Mr. Reynolds has refused to cooperate. Forced deduction process initiated. Someone had posted a meme of a penguin hugging a stack of cash with tears streaming down its face. Eleanor turned the phone off. She lay down. In the dark, she closed her eyes. A scene from 3 years ago surfaced. Derek had put his arm around her and said, "From today, we're a real couple." He'd smiled so sincerely she'd almost believed it. But she'd looked at the application copy. Under her name in the spouse field, in faint pencil, he'd written 2 tiny words that had later been erased. She'd seen them clearly. Back up. Eleanor opened her eyes. She stared at the ceiling. In the dark, she said one sentence, voice so low she might have been talking only to herself. I gave you just enough rope to get to the top. She turned over and closed her eyes. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., the morning meeting. She'd handle Derek's transition. And Vivian's. She'd announce that Vivian was taking over Derek's entire business line. Then she'd tell Vivian the secret. 3 months ago, when Eleanor promoted Derek to director, she'd drafted a second appointment letter at the same time. Vivian as the actual head of the business unit. That letter had been sitting in the CEO's office drawer for 100 days. Waiting for tonight. Eleanor pulled the blanket up. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. But sleep didn't come immediately. A crack of dawn light slipped through the curtain. She turned over. That afternoon 3 years ago filled her mind again. The courthouse. The wind. Derek's jacket on her shoulders. "I've got your back." When he said that, Eleanor had been CEO for less than 4 months. The board was watching. Everyone was waiting to see if a 28-year-old woman could turn around the family manufacturing business. She was exhausted. Standing outside the courthouse that day, she finally felt like she could breathe. Derek was a junior marketing hire. During a supplier dispute, he'd stepped in front of her when a client had pointed at her and said, "What does a woman know about supply chains?" Derek stepped between them. "Talk to me," he said. "I'll figure it out." He didn't really know the details. But he stood there like a wall. That night, Eleanor asked him, "Do you know who I am?" He said, "Yeah. You're marketing's Ellie. You sit at the end table. You water the plants." He didn't say, "You're the owner's daughter." He didn't say, "You're the future CEO." He said, "The person who waters the plants." Eleanor cried that night. Then she decided to marry him. She thought she'd found someone who didn't see her title. Someone who could pull her out of the CEO shell and just see Eleanor. On the marriage form, Derek hesitated at the spouse field. He wrote an E and crossed it out. "I'll fill it in later," he said. The clerk pushed. He stepped out to take a call. When he came back, the field was already filled. By Eleanor. "Your writing's better than mine," he'd said. She'd looked at him. He'd smiled so warmly she'd decided not to ask, "Who was that call with?" During those 3 minutes, had he been deciding whether to write her name? She'd checked the records later. He'd called a lawyer. Call duration, 2 minutes and 47 seconds. She'd found that lawyer the following year. He told her Derek's question, "If I get married, what's the property split in a divorce?" Eleanor had printed that call log and placed it in a brown envelope. It sat at the bottom of her wardrobe. Next to the equity transfer agreement. She told herself, "If he ever shows me real love, I'll burn that envelope." She waited 3 years. He never showed it. Under the same night sky, Derek still sat on the cold concrete of the parking garage. His phone was cracked. He switched to an old one and logged back into WeChat. He'd been removed from the company group. He logged into an alt account, one he'd created with Vivian's initials. Still in the group. The group was celebrating. Someone had posted a finance screenshot, Derek's salary, about $87,000 a year before tax. 317 employees. Doubling their bonuses came to about $2,700 each. Total, about $850,000. After deductions and deferred comp, Derek's actual take-home was about $73,000. Shortfall, about $783,000, to be recovered from severance. So he'd have to work 17 years to pay this off? He's fired. He can't work. Then what happens to the rest? Ms. Vance says, deduct from severance. Legal action for the balance. 3 seconds of silence. Then a flood of CEO for life emojis. Derek put the phone down. His mind was a mess, but one thought came into focus. He remembered why he'd chosen Vivian. It wasn't because she was beautiful. The marketing woman, the one in gray, wasn't ugly. But she sat in the corner, dressed in gray, watering plants. She looked like dust that could blow away. Vivian was different. On her first day, she'd walked into the executive meeting in a dark green blazer. 6-inch heels. Every step sounded like a nail driving into wood. Derek sat in the back row of the director's section and watched her present. 92 slides. Every number sourced. Every plan had a backup. He'd thought, this woman can help me. He'd been a director for 3 years, going nowhere. The gray one, Ellie, she'd knitted him a scarf, brewed his tea, grabbed his takeout. But she couldn't help him move up. He needed someone who could push. Vivian could. What he didn't know, Vivian's offer letter came directly from the CEO's office. Signed by Eleanor. Eleanor had written at the bottom, Ms. Vivian possesses independent leadership capability. Recommend completing business review within 3 months and reporting directly to the CEO's office. The version Derek saw had CEO's office replaced with marketing director's office. Eleanor had asked HR to make that change. She wanted Vivian to appear in Derek's orbit. She wanted him to think she was an opportunity. Then she watched to see if he'd reach for it. He did. Faster and harder than she'd expected. Those 3 lines on the sticky note, Eleanor had captured them remotely one night from a security camera. Derek had stuck the note inside the drawer and taken a photo for his backup account. The backup account nickname, Future VP. When Eleanor saw that screenshot, she was boiling water for his hangover tea. She poured it into a cup to cool. Then she sat on the couch and sent legal a message, draft a termination notice. Body text blank. File code A07. A07 was the last number she'd assigned him. If he turned back, the number would expire. He didn't turn back. The morning after the sticky note, he bought champagne roses. Vivian hadn't left the building. After the gala, she didn't go to the garage or call a ride. She sat on the sofa in the 17th floor executive lounge. Her heels were off. Her bare feet pressed into the carpet. A cup of vending machine coffee sat in front of her. Her chat with Eleanor stopped at the last word, yes. She scrolled through her own messages. 3 months ago, the recruiter's email had included an anonymous note. One line, there's a person at this company named Derek. Watch him. Don't trust him. She'd assumed it was a competitor's prank. Deleted it. Now she realized that email arrived 2 full weeks before her official offer. 2 weeks before she joined, someone had already placed her. That someone was the person who'd said yes tonight. Vivian took a sip of coffee. It was cold. Bitter. She thought about this afternoon. Derek had asked her to grab a file from his office. She'd opened the drawer and spotted the sticky note. Her first reaction was anger. Her second, why did this note happen to be visible at that exact angle? She'd looked at the drawer layout later. The folder angle. The pen holder position. The corner of the sticky note, peeking out just so. Like someone had measured it in advance. She understood now. Eleanor had calculated that Derek would ask her to get something. She'd calculated Vivian would open that drawer. She'd calculated Vivian would see those 3 lines. She'd calculated Vivian would take a photo. She'd even calculated Vivian would send it to her. Vivian set the cold coffee down. She looked at her hands. Tonight, when Derek had handed her the mic, her nails were neatly trimmed. Clear polish. She'd felt a flicker of something real. Derek's voice was low. The lights were perfect. 300 people watched. Anyone might have felt a flicker in that scene. But before she'd reached for the mic, she'd had a note in her pocket. A folded piece of paper. Slipped to her that afternoon by the young woman in marketing. It read, "Don't go on stage tonight. Trust me." No signature. But Vivian recognized the handwriting. That woman in gray, when she signed documents, the last stroke of her E curled upward. Vivian hadn't believed it then. She'd thought it was jealousy. Now she pulled that note from her pocket, unfolded it, smoothed it flat, and took a photo. Sent it to Eleanor. One line of text, "Did you set this up too?" Eleanor replied in 1 second, no. Vivian stared at the word dot. Then she typed, who is she? Eleanor wrote back, a kid who sits next to me, drops potato chip crumbs everywhere, and was the first one to notice something was wrong with Derek. Vivian remembered, tonight, when the young woman had screamed say yes, after the first shout, her face went pale dot. She'd already seen Eleanor's expression dot. But she said nothing. She stood, clapped twice, sat down, and stayed silent dot. Vivian put her phone down. Barefoot on the carpet, she walked to the window. 17 floors up, the city's lights stretched to the horizon dot. She typed one more message to Eleanor, Ms. Vance, tomorrow's meeting, I'll sit next to you. Eleanor, good. Vivian added, not next to you. Next to you. On your right. Eleanor, I know. That seat's been empty for 3 years. Vivian powered off her phone and stood up. She put her heels back on dot. At the elevator, she paused. A new employee notice had been taped to the wall. Neatly aligned dot. She reached out and pressed the corner flat dot. Then she stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button dot. Outside, the night wind hit her face. She wrapped her dress tighter. A small smile crossed her lips dot. 3 years that seat stayed empty dot. Starting tomorrow, someone was sitting in it dot. The next morning, Frank was the first to arrive dot. He opened the marketing department door and glanced at the corner desk. Gray seat cushion. Still there. The plant. Still there. Half a cup of water on the desk. He walked over, poured it out, refilled it, and set it back dot. He sat at his own supervisor's desk. Opened his email. 47 unread dot. The top one from the CEO's office, morning meeting, all staff. 9 a.m. Conference room A. Frank opened the agenda. Item 1, Derek transition. Item 2, Vivian's appointment. Item 3, CEO remarks dot. He closed the email and leaned back. Rubbed his eyes dot. 15 years. 15 years at this company. He'd gone from sales associate to department head. He'd watched the owner pass the company to his daughter. He'd watched them move from a factory to this office tower. He'd seen the CEO's office sit empty for 3 years, now finally occupied. He'd never realized that person had been sitting next to him for 3 years, eating takeout dot. Last month at the team dinner, Eleanor had crouched by the grill and tried to flip his chicken wings. She'd burned half of them and said, don't worry, I've got this. Frank had taken over because she was hopeless dot. Now he remembered, that same person had signed his son's promotion letter last week dot. Frank walked to Eleanor's old desk. He picked up the seat cushion and flipped it over dot. A sticky note on the back. Eleanor's handwriting. Frank, time for a new cushion. I put one in the cabinet. Gray. Thanks for the cover. Frank opened the cabinet. A gray cushion, folded neatly, sat on the top shelf dot. He took it out, unwrapped it, placed the new one on the chair. The old one went into the cabinet dot. He sat back down at his desk. Opened the company group. Typed one message. This morning, I changed the CEO's seat cushion. New one. Gray. I'm keeping the old one as a souvenir. Replies flooded in. Frank, you've gotten brave. Frank closed the phone and looked at that new cushion. He sighed dot. 3 years ago, Eleanor had first sat down next to him. She'd said, Frank, can I sit here? My side of the office is too cold. He'd said sure dot. He'd always wondered why the coldest spot in marketing was that exact corner. She'd said it was warm dot. Now he knew dot. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was the central vent from the CEO's office. She'd sat in the draft for 3 years dot. The wind had always been strongest there dot. At 8:40 a.m., Eleanor arrived at the office dot. Black blazer. White shirt. Hair pulled back. Small pearl earrings. George the security guard stood at attention and saluted. She nodded and stepped into the elevator. Someone was already inside. Legal head, Ms. Zhang, carrying a thick folder. Ms. Vance, Derek's paperwork is ready. Put it in my office. One more thing. Ms. Zhang pulled a single sheet from the bottom of the stack. This is Derek's original employee record from 3 years ago. You asked me to keep it. Eleanor took it. Marital status, married. Spouse name, originally someone else's name, crossed out. Next to it, in pencil, TBD. But beneath the crossout, a trace remained. 3 characters, a woman's name. Not Eleanor's. She'd checked that name years ago. Derek's college girlfriend. She'd moved abroad. When he submitted the form, Derek crossed out that name. He didn't write Eleanor. He wrote TBD. Eleanor folded the paper and put it in her pocket. Keep the original. Yes. The elevator reached 17. The doors opened. Vivian stood at the end of the hall. Navy blue suit. Hair pinned up. At the CEO's office door, holding a cup of coffee. Ms. Vance. Vivian handed it over. Black coffee, light sugar. Admin said this is what you drink. Eleanor took a sip. How did you know I was wearing black today? Guessed, Vivian said. It's a work day. Eleanor studied her for a second, then pushed open the office door. Vivian followed. She took the seat to Eleanor's right. That chair had been moved last night. The cleaning supervisor had received a note at midnight from me. 5 words, wipe the space next to me. The supervisor had sent a voice message, Ms. Vance, should I add a cushion? The reply, no. She'll bring her own. Vivian pulled a light gray cushion from her bag, set it on the chair, and Saturday. Ms. Vance, she said. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Did you pick me because you knew Derek would pick me? Eleanor set the coffee down. She met Vivian's eyes. I picked you because on your first day, you saw someone crouched in the elevator fixing a safety sign. You waited for her to finish before you stepped in. Vivian went still. You didn't rush her. You didn't step around. You waited 7 seconds, Eleanor said. In those 7 seconds, you showed me you're someone who waits. That's what I needed. Vivian looked down at her own sleeve. A small loose thread. And Derek? She asked. He stepped right over it, Eleanor said. The adhesive was still wet. It stuck to his shoe. When he got to his desk, he looked down and said, Who put this here? It's a mess. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Ms. Vance, do you hate him? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the morning light, the same direction she'd faced the night before, from the car, from the balcony. No, she said. I just took my pen back. At 9 a.m., the conference room was packed. 300 people crammed in, with more standing in the aisles. Frank sat in the second row. Next to him, the marketing assistant clutched an unopened bag of chips, too scared to tear it open. Vivian sat at Eleanor's right hand. An appointment letter lay in front of her. Eleanor walked to the podium. The projector lit up. Page 1, Derek Reynolds, contract termination notice. Page 2, Vivian, appointment to vice president, business division. Page 3, one line Eleanor had written herself. Effective immediately, all executive disclosure forms must include full spouse names. Anonymity, abbreviations, TBD, and placeholders are invalid. 3 seconds of silence. Then applause swept from the back row like a wave. Vivian raised her phone. The screen showed the message she'd sent last night, still unanswered. Ms. Vance, can people still believe in love? A new notification popped up. Eleanor had replied with 4 words. Believe in yourself. Vivian put her phone down, stood up, and walked to the stage. Eleanor handed her the mic. She said one line. My name is Vivian. Starting today, I sit next to Ms. Vance. Another round of applause. Frank sat in the audience, watching the two women stand on stage. One in black, one in blue, like two trees side by side. He thought it was more entertaining than last year's celebrity performance. He raised his phone and took a picture. Then he posted it, changed the CEO's cushion. New one. Gray. The comments exploded. Frank didn't read them. He was looking at the woman in the black blazer. He remembered the draft she'd sat in for 3 years. The safety notices she'd taped. The silence she'd maintained. And the microphone she'd finally taken. That cold tea had been poured out. New water was boiling. 6 months later, Derek sat in a cramped cubicle at a small company he'd never heard of before. A 5-year-old laptop sat in front of him. His title, Business Development Associate. Base salary, about $800 a month. Commission-based, but after 3 months, he hadn't closed a single deal. He scrolled through his feed and saw a photo Frank had posted. Company anniversary group shot. Eleanor stood center. Black blazer. Pearl earrings. Hair pinned back, sharper than 6 months ago. Vivian stood to her left. Navy suit. Shorter hair. She looked like a different person. Both of them were smiling. Derek zoomed in. Vivian's badge said Vice President. Beside it, smaller, Business Line Lead. Eleanor's lapel held a small pin, woven from red and gray threads, forming an irregular circle. He knew those colors. That scarf he'd buried. Someone had opened the cabinet, and everything inside had been donated to the company's charity box. Someone had pulled the scarf apart. One red thread. One gray thread. And woven a pin. Derek typed to Eleanor, "Is that pin from the scarf I threw away?" Read. No reply. He tried again, "Can you forgive me?" Read. Then, you are no longer friends with this user. Derek stared at the screen. He exited the app and called Frank. Frank, it's me. Derek? Frank's voice sounded surprised. New number? Yeah. Frank, how is Eleanor doing? A pause. She's good, Frank said. She just approved a new budget, new workstations for everyone. She moved her desk to the window. She used to sit in the draft, didn't she? That was then, Frank said. The draft's sealed now. She fixed it herself. Anything else? Derek opened his mouth. No. I've got a meeting. Talk later. Frank. Derek, Frank cut in. Do you know how long she let that tea sit? What tea? The one you made the morning of the gala. It went cold. She didn't drink it. When she poured it out, guess how many times she washed your mug? Derek said nothing. 3 times, Frank said. Then she rinsed it with boiling water. Then she wrapped it in plastic and put it in storage. She said, keep it. Use it as a cautionary example. Frank hung up. Derek sat in his cubicle. Outside, the sky was gray. He looked down. A dust stain on his trouser leg, from the subway. He remembered the wind outside the courthouse. The jacket on her shoulders. I've got your back. Her eyes when he'd said that. That look had never come back. She'd unknit the scarf. She'd pinned it to her blazer. She'd wrapped up his cup. She'd moved from the draft to the window. She'd removed her name from backup and deleted that category entirely. Derek turned his phone face down on the desk. His laptop pinged. A client cancellation. Third one today. He didn't open it. He just stared at the reflection in the dark screen, his own face. He looked 5 years older than he had 6 months ago. One question lingered: if he'd flipped that sticky note over and read the 4th line, would things have been different? He'd never know. Because the morning after the gala, Eleanor had peeled it off herself. She'd pinned it to the center of the office bulletin board. Below it, in permanent marker, one note. This sticky note is archived permanently as best cautionary exhibit of the year. All are welcome to view. Below that, a company stamp. END.